Well, ladies and gentlemen, for the last 1 week, students have been protesting across various cities alleging discrepancies in the way the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test for, or NEET, was held this time. NEET is the highly competitive and very, very tough single-level national examination carried out for medical aspirants, enabling them to seek admission in India's top medical institutions. Today, one of the main concerns of NEET candidates was addressed by the Supreme Court of India. Grace marks of 1,563 students have now been nixed, and they have the option of taking a retest on the 23rd of June. But as the center tried to find out a solution for students, the opposition is calling it the biggest scam under the Modi government, demanding a top court monitored probe into this entire issue. What's the truth? Was there a scam in NEET? Did rigging take place? Is a paper leak mafia operating unchecked, or is this issue being used as a tool by some politicians to mislead and create doubts in the minds of students? Well, we'll debate that. And coming up on the other side are two of the most authoritative voices. J-Sai Deepak, arguing counsel for the petitioner in the NEET case. Also joining me this evening is Dr. Vaidya Subramaniam, Vice Chancellor of the Sastra Deemed University.
एंटी टेस्टिंग एजेंसी है कि एक स्कैम एजेंसी है। 650 लाख मार्क्स लाने पे भी ऐसा लग रहा है कि उनको 400 मार्क्स जैसा फील हो रहा है। समझ में नहीं आ रहा कुछ क्या करूं मैं।
हमें क्लियरली लग रहा है कि कुछ ना कुछ तो हुआ है। ये 1500 से ज्यादा अमाउंट है जितना ग्रेस मार्क्स दिए गए हैं।
ऑनरेबल सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने स्पष्ट किया है उन 1563 स्टूडेंट्स को री एग्जामिनेशन का अपॉर्चुनिटी दिया जाएगा। नीट एक कॉम्पिटेंट एग्जामिनेशन करने वाला अथॉरिटी बन चुकी है। देखो, विपक्ष के पास कोई मुद्दा है नहीं।
नीट की जो परीक्षा दी है उनके भविष्य के साथ जो खिलवाड़ आज इस परीक्षा के द्वारा हुआ है उस पर एक जांच होनी चाहिए।
NEET should be scrapped and let the states decide what they want.
You're watching the News Hour at 9. Debate number 2 on Times Now. Super Prime Time.
Thank you very much for joining me, J-Sai Deepak. Also joining me is Vaidya Subramaniam of the Deemed University. J-Sai Deepak, this entire controversy around the NEET exam started because an unprecedented 67 students got the top score of 720 marks. 6 out of these were actually from the same center in Haryana, Jhajjar in Faridabad district. I want to ask you, today with the Supreme Court coming in and saying that 1,563 students who had got these grace marks will now have to reappear. Does this settle the entire controversy around NEET, or are there still some unanswered questions?
So I represent only one of the petitioners in the batch of petition. I represent Mr. Alak Pandey, who otherwise he goes by the name Physics Wala. So I can speak only on his behalf. The primary issue or the grievance that was aired in his petition was with respect to the grant of the grace marks, okay, which is about 1563 students were awarded grace marks for the loss of time they suffered because of the correct question paper reaching them late, okay. Now, other than these students and other than this petitioner, there are certain other petitioners who have raised the question, questioning basically the overall sanctity of the conduct of the examination because they have made allegations with respect to paper leaks. Since that issue is before the court and it's still pending, I'm not at liberty to comment on that beyond that because it's for the court to look into. But insofar as our primary grievance was concerned, that was with respect to the grant of grace marks, that stands addressed because the government was proactive enough to actually present a solution to the extent of saying that these marks should not have been granted in the first place. Therefore, those students who are the beneficiaries of these marks will have two options. One, either they get to take the test again, or they get to retain their marks after deducting the grace marks that have been granted to them. So to that extent, the concern that was raised in our petition stands significantly addressed.
So let me ask you, Mr. Vaidya Subramaniam, the question here is there are three types of errors that took place. Number one, a wrong question paper was sent and 1,563 students, had to be compensated with grace marks. That's error number one. Though the government now says it's only 6 centers out of 4,500, but the fact is 1,500 odd students have got affected. The second error arises because 44 students have got grace marks also because a wrong question or a wrong answer was later, because of the NCRT, which edition of the NCRT you're going with, some more grace marks were given. And then there is the question of 6 students in a single center getting the top score of 720 marks, which raises the question, what's going on? 3 errors. Is this what we do to a national examination which has high stakes for students? You've heard about suicides, the kind of hard work these students have to be putting in, and then literally playing with their scorecard and with their future. Is this right?
Thank you, Navika. The issue is, since you said, is this right? And my good friend Sai Deepak is aware that the Supreme Court in the PA Inamdar case has clearly said admissions to professional colleges must be done in a fair, transparent and non-exploitative manner. So I would like to first make a point clear that this issue of non-exploitativeness has been addressed because of the merit involved in this. It's been very transparently conducted by NTA, and the committee's recommendations that were placed before the Honorable Supreme Court, in Supreme Court's own words, has been said to be very fair and reasonable and justified, and the petitioners themselves have agreed. So the issue of fairness, transparency and non-exploitativeness has been adequately addressed by NTA throughout the entire process. The issue of 1563 students getting the grace marks now has been reversed and the status quo has been restored. So it has now come to a position where the status quo gives all candidates equal and a fair opportunity for getting admitted into this medical college admission system.
Well, so let me ask you, Sai Deepak, this transparency, was it forthcoming in the first place? Because some students got 718 and 719 marks. That's when, the red flag came up that how can you get this? You either get 716 or you get 720 marks. So the transparency did not come from the NTA. It came because a hue and cry was created when some students came up with these marks. Then the second question of the wrong question and the grace marks was not suo motu stated by the NTA. It also came up during questions that were raised. I want to come back to the issue of transparency. Do you think suo motu there was transparency, or was there a forced transparency, so to speak, and then the intervention by the Supreme Court, which has probably addressed some of the concerns of the students?
So there are 3 layers of issues here, and let me try and address each one of them. The results were announced on the 4th of June. Only when the students realized that some of these marks which have been secured by certain students are mathematically impossible considering the nature of the marking system of the examination, then questions were raised. Even at that stage, there was no clarification that was coming forth as to whether any grace marks were awarded or compensatory marks were awarded. That was not released at that point of time. Subsequently, when students started approaching courts, that's when a new circular was issued, which said that yes, compensatory marks have been awarded. But you see, there's an issue here, which is that whenever compensatory marks are awarded, the award of such marks must be envisaged according to some formula in the prospectus of the application for the examination itself. There is no such formula available in the prospectus of the examination itself. the only circumstance in which such marks could have been awarded under the NEET prospectus is when the candidates are physically challenged and in no other circumstance. Okay, so loss of time as a basis for grant of compensatory marks under NEET is available only for physically challenged students. So when this was pointed out, and then when petitions were lodged, that's when they came about. And then multiple petitions were filed before Chandigarh High Court, Kolkata High Court, Delhi High Court. We went to the Supreme Court. On the 9th is when our petition was filed. 11th is when the matter was mentioned. And by that date, on the 11th, a certain set of FAQs were released, basically explaining how these compensatory marks were awarded. But still the question was not answered. What is the basis for the compensatory marks in the terms and conditions of the examination itself? Then when the matter was listed today before the court, the NTA came up with the minutes of its meetings, which were held on the 11th and 12th of June, wherein they had taken a decision to do away with the concept of compensatory marks altogether, to put the matter to bed fully and to close the issue. Therefore, the issue was finally addressed before the court today. So even before the court could issue a notice in the petitions that were filed today, mine was item number 3 before court number 12, the counsel for NTA basically presented that, considering the nature of the issue that has been raised and that it appears that there is some merit to what has been raised, they have come out with a solution which proposes that out of the 1563 candidates, they would be given 2 sets of options: retake the test or be happy with your original score minus the grace marks.
What you're saying confirms that this is all post facto transparency when matters reach the court. So Dr. Subramaniam, there is no transparency that happened suo moto by the NTA. Number one. Number two, 14th June is when the results were supposed to come. They suddenly come on the 4th of June. Many people will ask the question on, was this done to avoid the glare? On 4th of June, the country was busy in the general election results. So quietly you bring out the results of the NEET exams. Many people are raising that question as well.
On that, I wouldn't attribute motive for the advance in the release of the results because, I would say that the system has efficiently worked and the dates of release of results have been advanced, and that gives more time for counseling to happen in an organized manner. And remember that the NEET counseling also has collateral consequences on admissions to other professional courses. So advancing the result date will only hasten and accelerate the process, point one. And the transparency of NTA, before June 1, I'll just push back on timeline. Even before the release of the results, I'm just making a point that the NTA is very much concerned about transparency and has uphold it because it shared the answer keys, allowed students to challenge only after receiving the responses, which in this time 2024 NEET, around 27,000 plus responses were received, carefully analyzed, and in this transparent mechanism, the results were released. The issue of the grace marks has now been addressed adequately in a fair manner, thereby restoring without compromising the integrity of the merit on this entire exercise.
Dr. Subramaniam, that is post facto. In the first place, the grace marks, on what basis were they given, was not disclosed. That was disclosed only today in Supreme Court and addressed over the last 2 days in meetings, as Advocate J.Sai Deepak is saying. So my question comes back to the issue. Also, a clean chit has been given that there was no paper leak. But there is an investigation going on in Bihar about the paper leak issue. Are you of the view that the government is trying to preclude that investigation itself?
If I may respond to the question.
The NTA, in fact, has voluntarily come forward and participated in this investigation and given all documents that will support the investigation process. So the investigation process is not yet over, but the fact is that NTA has been so cooperative. So the extent of cooperation they are extending is only symptomatic of the fact that NTA has nothing to hide.
Can I just answer the question? Yes. So the first point is you have to realize that over the last few years, the number of people who have appeared for NEET has exponentially increased. This time, 24 lakh people have participated in the examination. Therefore, in an examination conducted at this scale, perhaps some room can be made for certain lapses. Having said that, please, this is something I think it's important for your viewers to note. There has been no closure of the issue of any allegations with respect to the leak, nor has there been any stonewalling of that issue on the part of the NTA before the court. Okay? I don't see at least any non-cooperation, at least as someone who's appeared in the matter before the court. And if I may say so with the deepest of humility, the fact of the matter is the issue of compensatory marks has been addressed quickly, at least to the happiness of my client, for the simple reason that it would have been possible for somebody to take the position saying 24 lakh students have appeared, counseling is about to start, there is no question of us doing a retest for 1500 students at this particular stage. Instead, the position that is being taken is that we will conduct the examination latest by 23rd of June for these 1563 students, so that the counseling process starts on schedule by July. That is the position that was taken before the court. So while we can have certain issues with respect to the timing of it in terms of saying, should this have been done before or not, to the extent that we had raised an allegation, or rather we had raised a grievance before the court with respect to the grace marks, that stood addressed to a significant extent. That's all I have to say.
And also,
so are you saying it's all hunky-dory now, and everything is in order for the 24 lakh students who have appeared for this exam?
I am nobody to give a clean chit for the entire process, because all issues have not been completely put to bed, because the rest of the issues raised in the petitions with respect to the leak aspect of it, or allegations of leak, are still sub judice, and they're going to be taken up by the court on 8th of July. So close to 6 petitions on that aspect will be taken up by the Supreme Court. And I think as there is a bit more of investigation that's going on, so I will want to see what is the outcome of it. Nobody has given a clean chit so far on this particular aspect, nor have I seen any kind of evasive, non-cooperative attempts on the part of the NTA as far as this issue is concerned. I would say that it's time to wait and watch, simply because as a representative of the petitioner in the court, I do not wish to make any further statements after having approached the court.
All right. So, Dr. Subramaniam, I want to ask you, you handle these students almost on a daily basis. I want to ask you, what does this do to the psyche of those students who are appearing for these exams? Is our examination system completely above board, or are there reforms that are still required in the 21st century where we can have a more foolproof system?
Yeah, I think considering the scale at which this examination has been conducted, I would say that it has been conducted in an organized manner. Look at just the number of centers as compared to the previous 2023. Last time we had around 4,000 centers, this time 4,750. More awareness, more sensitization, more preparedness levels of the students to take up this examination. And more importantly, one thing that we'll also have to understand is that the NEET syllabus this time has been calibrated to the revised syllabus of NCERT and many states boards that were done in 2022, whereas 2022-2023 NEET was relatively competitive than the school syllabi. Now that also has been adequately addressed, and it is in the interest of the students to have a compatibility between the school board syllabi and the NEET's curriculum and syllabi. There has been a level playing field for the students. So that, I think, has given the students an opportunity to take up this examination in a competitive manner, and because of that you will see more number of students doing better than last year. So it's unfair to attribute any motives on the number of students who scored more, because that's how the way in which students are getting prepared to the new syllabi. Considering the scale at which this was organized, I think the NTA has done a good job in making sure that all the issues were adequately addressed.
Well, we'll wait and watch when the investigations are complete. For now, for students, ray of hope. Is the dust settling over the entire controversy? Well, we'll continue to monitor the situation and get feedback from students who've been facing nightmares because of some errors that have taken place. We leave it at that. Thank you very much, Dr. Subramaniam. Thank you, Sai Deepak. And thank you to us. Good to have you on the News Hour watching us, and thank you very much for your viewership during election week, and we're happy to continuously be called as the Election News headquarters, thanks to your viewership that has always stayed with us. Thank you very much for your trust, and good night. Be safe.